Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. I'm Ryan Noonan, and we are a month away from the NFL draft. Pro days are happening all over the country. We had LSU yesterday. We got Drake May in North Carolina today. We have Washington out west with Michael Penix, the receivers, all that's going on out there. We are excited to be here. And again, Move the Line will continue to be your home for all things NFL draft betting in particular. Until we get here, we got a new mock draft from our guy Connor Allen to talk about today. So again, if you are hanging out with us on YouTube, hit the like, hit the subscribe, all those things. Check us out on the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe as well. We'll get to all the other NFL stuff, coaching changes, future markets, those things are starting to come out, win totals. Those are coming out, maybe some interesting thoughts on the kickoff. I know Connor does not want to talk about new kickoff rules today or swivel hip drop tackles today. But hey, Connor, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, not much. I just think it's like the stone cold worst content. I just don't think it matters like at all. I mean, the kickoff thing maybe, but I just don't think anyone knows. So it's just like so irrelevant. So many people are spending like 30 minutes talking about it. So I'll give it my 20-second rant there, and that's about all the breath I'm going to give it.
I'm excited for both. I mean, they're both relevant. Big tackle guy checking in here. I have opinions on the swivel hip drop tackle, which again, the swivel piece is important. Swivel hip drop tackle. It's basically shit. Well, so I'll refer to it as shit. It's SHDT, but just to make it short, we'll just refer to it as shit moving forward. I think the shit's going to be impactful when we get into tackle props later in the season, but we'll get there when we get there. And kickoffs, I don't know, it's gonna be cool. It's like a run play now. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. Also joining us here, back in his home from a week in Vegas. He survived the grannies, the bookies trying to place their 8 a.m. 5-leg college hoops parlays and stuff. Scott Smith, what's going on, bud?
What's up, guys? Back from Vegas. Went from dry heat up there to a lot of pollen down here, so a little congested. But look, LSU Pro Day yesterday. I had a few connections up there, and it's time to get into the thick of it. This is the home stretch this last month that we have, kind of breaking things down and getting into some things. And you're starting to see a lot of things clear up and some rumors and things of some teams that are looking to move up and trying to make some moves to solidify their slot to get some of these quarterbacks.
Probably have a pretty free-flowing conversation today. We were talking offline before we get started around conversations with some of the betting markets that are taking shape out there. And again, some of these are limited to a specific book, which makes it a little bit harder for us. But, we have, over-under in conference stuff. We have over-under on, offensive players. We're starting to get some more, I'm feeling like pretty solid about a handful of like team positional stuff, which I think is a big crux of, mocking at this point. And again, we can throw up, Connor, your mock draft that you just did, your 2.0, and kind of, lead us through discussions on what you want to do here. Obviously, we had the LSU Pro Day yesterday with Jayden Daniels. That went well. We always joke. I mean, that is the ultimate shorts and t-shirt Olympics. It is, scripted in a very controlled team-led environment, even different than the Pro Day, which is just kind of a general led thing. This is very much designed to showcase the university's players and have them perform very well. It'd be hard and strange nowadays to have someone feel like, that was a really poor pro day. But what are your thoughts? Again, I know you've been kind of, we've kind of led because Caleb feels so locked in to number one now. A lot of our discussions have kind of started with Jayden Daniels, Drake May, and now we've had some pretty significant line movement, and we can talk about that, I guess, too. Is that noise? Is that just market steam, which is prevalent at this point? Because it doesn't take much to move a market where, JJ McCarthy, not only in the mix, we were pushing back on JJ top 10 when we first started doing these shows. But that's more player take based than anything else. It's like JJ is now 3-1, a little shorter than 3-1 to go second to the Commanders. You're seeing a lot of mocks where McCarthy is going third to New England and they're bypassing Drake May, which makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit. But what are your thoughts on kind of the 4 quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, 4? Commanders kind of having the anchor to start there at 2.
Yeah, at this point, I think it's more likely than not to happen, to be honest. I mean, Caleb's locked in at 1, and all the comments out of 2 and 3, like, people have asked them, are you trading down? And so we'll start with the Commanders here. I mean, they didn't say no, but they were pretty much like, it would take like an outrageous amount. And I think that was kind of the answer at 3 as well with the Patriots, who said it might be somewhat open to it. But again, like Robert Kraft came out and was like, yeah, maybe we trade down. But at the end of the day, we need a new quarterback. And you're not going to get a quarterback trading down. So, I mean, if at the end of the day you're trading down, I mean, it would be pretty surprising to see them do that unless they had another guy in mind, which I guess is not completely out of the question, but I don't think that's likely. So I think we're going to have 1, 2, 3 stay put. And that brings us to 4 here, where Minnesota already traded some of their mid-round picks to get another first-round pick as ammunition. They're trading to 4 or 5, or 2 or 3 if it's possible. But again, I don't think that's likely. I think the most likely outcomes here are 4 or 5, where they'll pick J.J. McCarthy. So I had it 4 in this mock, and I'll kick it to you guys for some thoughts because I just unloaded on the top 4 there. But J.J. McCarthy I buy him as a top 5 pick. I'm not sure I buy him over Daniels or May. That being said, so Gerard Mayo at their conference gave one little tidbit about the number one thing he looks for in a quarterback is decision making. I'm not going to say that that's Drake May's strong suit specifically, or Jayden Daniels. I mean, it's not like it's outrageously bad, but I mean, Drake May had plenty of turnovers, and I would say that's not exactly what he's known for. And so that certainly is sticking in my mind as something that could be important, but I'm not entirely sure. So that's how I see kind of the top 4 shaking out as of now.
Where are you at here, Scott?
Yeah, so I've been chasing down quite a few things here, especially yesterday with the LSU Pro Day here locally where I'm at. And look, when it comes to Washington specifically, I've been on the Drake May train, and the information I'm getting is not pointing in that direction. And specifically, what I'm hearing is that Washington has not made a decision, but it's more along the lines of they're putting together a contingency plan should a window open and Caleb Williams become available. I'm hearing that they are still trying to explore options to see if they can get Caleb Williams. But then when you start looking at Chicago and what their actions have been, they haven't done a lot of homework and haven't done a lot of meetings with Jayden Daniels or Drake May. So what they're showing is that they're not, they're going to pick Caleb Williams. The odds reflect that. And Washington is just kind of keeping that door open in case it does, make itself available to do, make a move there to get Caleb Williams. So Washington still does have some hope. But from what I have heard is that and this is one of the things I'm just going to kind of get into how I parse through information. 2 or 3 of the things that you'll hear a lot is you'll hear the belief is, or you'll hear the expectations are, or at this time. And when you're hearing that type of information, those specific lines, that's conjecture. And that's a projection based upon incomplete amount of information. That's not something that's coming directly from a source. A lot of these media members and guys, when they're in the media and they're getting something out there, they're going to say, my sources say, and they're going to make sure that they're the first ones getting credit for it. So you're hearing a lot of that right now, and the belief is right now that it's going to be Jayden Daniels. The reasons that I was told it's going to be Jayden Daniels is that specifically he's just a little bit more dynamic, and they think they'll be more competitive, and he'll be able to cover up some of the holes that they still have along the offensive line, and they think Jayden Daniels at this point in time will be the person that makes them competitive faster. So he's the person that I'm hearing that Washington is leaning towards if the Caleb Williams window is indeed shut. I also did hear that Minnesota did make calls up to Washington, and some of those conversations surrounded 3 first-round picks. But that the interesting part is that while Minnesota has been heavily linked to J.J. McCarthy and Drake May specifically, that if they did move up to 2, it's to get Jayden Daniels that they're interested in, not either of those other 2 guys. Washington has not been open to moving down, specifically because they want to leave that window open in case there is something for Caleb Williams. But I think they end up staying pat. And as of right now, my mind is changing that it's going to be Jayden Daniels at 2.
The interesting thing that's happened with this J.J. McCarthy's team is that, which doesn't always happen, especially in draft markets, they don't always reflect the move, is that Jayden Daniels over the last week has gone from basically minus 180 to be the number 2 pick in the draft. It's like minus 115 on FanDuel, minus 120 on DraftKings. That is a more palatable price if you happen to have interest in getting back into that market. comparatively, where it had shifted. Like I said, we were get up to like almost minus 200 at a certain point. So very, very interesting. Again, like a bettable number at this point with increasing information. So thoughts there, Connor?
No, I mean I think it's becoming like a bettable point. Like at this point, the issue though is like, in my opinion, a normal betting stance, like I think that there's value on this number because I think there's probably 60-40 at this point. Daniels, maybe 60-30-10, 60-30 Daniels, May, McCarthy
Sure.
at this point. But 60% implied probability is way higher than minus 115. So in a normal betting market, I'm betting this. Like that totally makes sense. But in a draft market, I just think it's a little bit more volatile and flimsy in terms of like, if a report comes out tomorrow that Drake May is the Washington's guy, Drake May is going to be minus 250 in like, 20 minutes. But at the same time, we've seen Albert Breer, Adam Schefter in the last 24 or 48 hours say, I think they're leaning Daniels. Like, and that's what everyone kind of assumes at this point. There was the potential signal with the whole Mariota signing, and all that. Like, I think that it's probably, it may not be anything, but I think it's not something. I mean, I would rather have Mariota and Daniels paired together instead of Mariota and like Sam Howell. Like the playbook probably just looks different, for
Sure.
your backup. So I don't know. I think that there could be some value there still on Jayden Daniels here. And then McCarthy's team just like totally has kind of disrupted that market. And in my opinion, it's awesome because it leaves like way more money making opportunities at 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, to be honest.
Interesting too, because the consensus when we had the trade back, or with Minnesota, making the acquisition of the second pick in the first round to be able to move up, was the first thought was, hey, the Chargers want to move back. The Cardinals are kind of locked in there, but I like what you did here because the Cardinals have basically said we're open for business. They know that they have a lot of needs. They have a quarterback, and if it's close to for them. In this instance, they have, 11, 23, and 27 here. So talk to me a little bit about what you did here in terms of McCarthy, and then, landing on Marvin Harrison to the Chargers, who have, externally like punted on receiver, right? Like move on from Keenan Allen. Again, 34, it makes a ton of sense. Big cap hit. They had to do a ton of maneuvering to get under the cap number. You're moving on from, Mike Williams. You don't have a lot internally. Quentin Johnson wasn't the guy last year, but like, yeah, they want to, make some moves, solidify the offensive line. When you hear Harbaugh talk about offensive line, it's like, well, damn, how are they not taking an offensive lineman? But do they pass on Marvin Harrison at 5? That's a stretch for me too. So I kind of like what you did here, but I could be sold on and move back too. But talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think starting at number 4 here, my thought process has been kind of as follows. So essentially, we know the Cardinals really like Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, that's pretty clear. There's rumors of, Nabers over Harrison Jr. for a couple teams. I think the Cardinals are very much, locked in on Marvin Harrison Jr. But if Minnesota is offering 2 first-round picks plus probably a second or a third, what receiver in the league right now is going to get you 2+ first-round picks? What, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson? End list. I mean, Tyreek Hill was just traded for the 28th overall pick a couple years ago, which again was a bad trade in hindsight. Devontae Adams was like a late first. Like, I mean, no one is grabbing that price tag, and you're getting it for a guy who's not even played yet. I mean, he's an awesome prospect. Don't get me wrong, but like, you're getting immediately 2 first-round picks, and they have a lot of holes. So like, do they love Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, but do they also need way more stuff? Yeah, and like as I lay on this mock, they can get Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, and an offensive lineman. Like, I mean, that's a lot, filling a lot of gaps there all in one swoop. And so on top of, the Cardinals potentially being interested in trading back, you have the Vikings interested in trading up. You have the Giants, who are now spending a lot of time traveling all the different pro days to different quarterbacks and like doing private workouts, which to me, in my mind, means that they're not bluffing. Like they actually want a quarterback. So they have to be bidding for number 4. We know, we've talked about it multiple times. The Broncos, I mean, are they really going to go into the season with whatever junk they have at quarterback right now? Sean Payton has not been shy about moving up in the past. Like I could see them unloading this year's first, next year's first, and next year's second to get up to, 4 potentially. And I don't think that's that unreasonable either. And then we have the Raiders too, who love Jayden Daniels, who have, Antonio Pierce has talked about him plenty. And like, I think they're interested in moving up. So all of that points to, if 2 and 3 aren't trading down, like all these teams have to be bull rushing number 4 at this point. Like if they're not calling Monty Austin for it, I would be really shocked. So I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts, because in my mind right now, it's like 80-20 that the Cardinals are trading back. And I know that's like way off market and way off market sentiment right now, but like, I just don't see a way that they decide we want Marvin Harrison Jr. more than 2+ first-round picks.
I agree. I love it. I think it's going to be a bidding war because, as you said, there are multiple teams trying to make that move, right? And just naturally competing against each other to be able to get to that spot where there is, and kind of the talk around like, do you want to trade up and make this move to grab the 4th quarterback in the draft? That's kind of nonsense to me in a lot of ways. Like, historically, you've had some pretty good, like Josh Allen was like the 4th quarterback in the draft, right? Or like the 3rd quarterback in the draft. Like this, it just doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you evaluate the quarterback, I think that he is an answer to a problem that you have. And if you have a problem at quarterback, that supersedes any other problem you have on your roster. You need to have that question answered. So McCarthy being quarterback 4 doesn't really change it for me and shouldn't really for others. Denver's going to be aggressive. They are in the mix. So knowing that Minnesota has the ammo to make it happen as well, like Arizona is in a lovely position to be able to take home more than any trade chart is going to tell you, because they're all obviously historically has also been more of a tax paid in these instances when it's a quarterback. It's not just straight up change for what the chart says when a quarterback's involved. So yeah, all those teams are going to be firing to try to get up there too. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's some information out there that is pointing towards Minnesota having a handshake agreement and framework in place already with the Chargers to move to 5, and that they've also been in contact with Arizona, essentially saying, look, if somebody moves up or gives you an offer, we're willing to match it or beat it. So the framework looks like it's there based upon rumors and some information that's out there. I'm still trying to track down and verify a little bit more of that with some of the connections that I have. I've also heard that, look, the Giants, they are working out these quarterbacks and that they have made a call to New England to see if New England's willing to move up. And specifically the one that they're interested in is Drake May there at 3. If the board does fall with Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels 1 and 2. So I do think you're going to see a lot of these teams moving up. And one other thing that I've heard here recently is that if the Cardinals do move down, a player to keep in mind that they're high on that's moving up boards is Quinyon Mitchell at cornerback. And they may go ahead and move down, take Quinyon Mitchell and address wide receiver and offensive line there later with Mitchell or somebody else. Is essentially the way that Connor has this mock draft going. So there's a lot of options there. I do think that specifically when you look at Denver and the Raiders, I think they're kind of on the outside looking in the fact that they're just a little bit too far out with not enough assets. I think Minnesota has done the best as far as being able to position themselves to go ahead and get that quarterback. I think McCarthy is kind of the fallback if they miss out on a Daniels and a Drake May, but I don't think that some of these guys, and specifically when you talk about Minnesota, they're looking to make Justin Jefferson happy. He turned down a $30 million a year contract from what they said. There's always going to be that option. They wouldn't let him go or get out, for free or anything like that. So they would always franchise him, but they still want to make their top option happy. They invested in Addison last year, so they have pieces around. They just need to get a quarterback in place, and I think that's what they're going to look to do. And I think that Minnesota is the prime team that's going to move up, and based upon all the information, they're already putting together the steps that they need to do so.
I still think Denver's a sneaky team. I think they leave this first round with a quarterback. I think they're either going to try to get up there or they are going to take Bo Nix at 12 or like they are, they're going to take a quarterback. I don't know what else they're going to do. It seems like I just can't imagine it's just Jarrett Stidham and they're like, oh, we'll figure it out next year with a pretty weak, free agency quarterback. Good quarterbacks just don't hit free agency very often. And when you have a spot in the draft where you can punt future stuff, because again, they have very limited draft capital this year in terms of like seconds and thirds. Like it would have to be future plays, considering that the price is going to be pretty expensive for what Minnesota is willing to pay. It's going to be pretty expensive for Denver to do it, but I think that they take a shot at it because, like, again, you don't have a quarterback. What do you even do it? Especially in a division with the Chiefs, with the rebuild in LA with the Chargers and stuff. So yeah, it's just a very, very interesting discussion. So I like what Connor did here at the very top. Skipping a little bit, I want to talk about what's kind of like turned into over like the last month, the most consensus pick It is very weird to see anyone with a mock draft that doesn't have Dallas Turner at 8. What does Atlanta do if they don't do Dallas Turner at 8? And if not, how far does Dallas Turner fall? Does he get scooped up with the Bears? Again, like both 8 and 9 with like Turner and Odunze feel like very, very common here. Connor, did you give any thoughts about doing anything different on either of those positions? Or what are your thoughts there?
Initially, no on Turner at 8. I thought that was kind of more of like a locked in pick, but we laid our boy Pretty Ricky to rest a week and a half ago. Local Twitter insider, there was nothing, and became an instant highlight reel overnight, like basically nailing every free agent thing. Anthony Amico just released a mock and found basically the next Pretty Ricky of the Falcons, and he was nailed like 5 or 6 things in a row as well. And now is saying that Dallas Turner is not their number one edge, and that like they do want an edge, but they would like to trade down. But they could be interested in Quinyon Mitchell as one of their top corners. So I do think that Quinyon Mitchell at 8 is very live there specifically. And then Rome Odunze, I think if Rome Odunze is there at 9, the Bears are going to take him. I got to reach back out to my guy and see what's up. He gave us some good plugs last year with the Darnell Wright stuff later in the draft. So I got to circle back there, but I think we're still a little early. Maybe I'll give it another week or so. So yeah, I don't know. The Dallas Turner 8 stuff is almost like locked consensus, and I guess, do we even have a reason besides like they need edge and Dallas Turner we think is the best edge?
No, I mean they've been historically bad for like 5-6 years from a pressure standpoint. Like they need it, but they definitely they need corner help as well. Like they don't have anything there. Let me look. I want to look at our guy Vegas Refunds draft sheet here. Vegas Refund will be back with us next week. There's a Rogue 12 from a CBS mock, 11 from Fantasy Pros. Otherwise, you're basically painted 8 across the board for Dallas Turner over like the last 20 or so mock drafts that have come out. Probably even more. Like is consensus as consensus gets right now, which is kind of wild to see. So yeah, I mean it makes sense, but there doesn't seem to be any reporting there per se or anything coming out from Atlanta. Just kind of a easy connect the dots in terms of player range and team need. So that's it. I just want to kind of push back on some of those things and try to stay pliable in terms of information coming in, because I do think cornerback makes a ton of sense for them. And I think Quinyon Mitchell has kind of separated himself as more the consensus corner one here as we get further along in the process. So that one makes a lot of sense. Interesting here. And again, you can circle back to anything else that you wanted, Connor. You did kind of a double dip for the Cardinals at 11 and 23 with wide receiver. Thoughts there? Because obviously it's an interesting thing knowing that they have a ton of team needs, cornerback being one of them. And like Scott even mentioned with, Mitchell being in play for them at 11.
Yeah, the Arizona Connects that I had said that they want to prioritize obviously wide out and offensive line, and then maybe corner as well. Like it's just kind of like that connection right there. And so I thought Brian Thomas Jr. made a ton of sense if they missed out on Marvin Harrison Jr. I do want to circle back real quick to the Marvin Harrison Jr. stuff. So I've been playing like some. So first off, initially I tried talking you guys into Marvin Harrison Jr. at 6. By kind of this theory of like JJ or someone trades up to 4 to take JJ McCarthy. The Chargers, I mean, they've been nonstop drumbeat about them wanting to trade down, about them wanting to take defense, about them wanting to get offensive line. None of it really is, about Marvin Harrison Jr. But if you go back to a year ago, when, these teams had no reason to lie, like Harbaugh had no reason to lie. He was just, a coach at Michigan. He said that they specifically tried to double cover Marvin Harrison Jr. as much as possible. Their defensive coordinator said he's the best wide receiver prospect the last 15 to 20 years. That same defensive coordinator is now the DC of the Chargers. Harbaugh played with Marvin Harrison Jr.'s dad on the Colts for multiple years. Like, to me, this just seems like one of those things that no one talks about it. And then draft day, we're like, oh, of course, the team that lost multiple receivers and coached against this guy who went for 250 total yards against them in 2 games. And 2 touchdowns on like 15 receptions, and they viewed as like one of the best prospects ever that they drafted. So that would totally make sense to me, but it also makes sense for them to not do that and decide to do something else. So I sprayed I've been sprinkling the board with some non-Marvin Harrison Jr. 4 stuff. So like 6, 7, I played to the Bears. I think the Bears could trade up to 5. You know, even if they like wanted to, that's like 20-1 right now on ESPN bet. Again, like long numbers. I think 7 was like 100-1 or something like that. So, you know, it takes crazy stuff to happen, but I'm pretty sure the Giants are Malik Nabers' team. That's what's how everything points towards that. Like, I think they're a team that could actually have Nabers ahead of Harrison. I don't think the Chargers are that team. I don't think the Cardinals are that team. But I mean, crazier stuff has happened, right?
Yeah. I mean, they are currently on DraftKings -150 to take an offensive lineman first, plus 130 to take a wide receiver first. I think the interesting piece is probably better like honing in on Harrison specifically versus just painting the broad wide receiver odds there, which is interesting. So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts there, Scott, in terms of like the Harrison, the Nabers team? Jeff in the chat mentions too, Nabers stock seems to be going up. Any chance he is ahead of Maserati Marv? I mean, I talked about it last week. I think it's just kind of fancy play syndrome. I think these general managers like to make safe picks too, and I think Harrison is both safe with a ton of upside, and Harrison being the safer prospect with the name value and all that stuff is just something that teams like to do. They sleep better at night, not having to feel like they have to defend Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison over the next handful of years. What are your thoughts to kind of how those wide receivers are playing out there?
I think there is some legitimacy that there are a few teams that have Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. But the one thing that I go back to is Marvin Harrison Jr. has chosen not to work out, not to do much of anything. He has the NFL connections through his dad and some other things. And I just think for him to make that decision of how this draft process is going to play out, he's had to have some type of guarantees from some of these teams that are here in that front 5 to 6, 7 picks that he's going to be the guy over Malik Nabers. I think him not working out maybe has turned off a few teams' front offices that want to have access to him and see some of those things, but he's chosen just to stand on his tape, and his tape is very good. Nabers went out and blew it away yesterday as far as just the athleticism. I think he's proven he's the more explosive wide receiver of the two. If you're comparing those two, and here locally, the teams that he was seen with out around town was specifically Tennessee and Arizona, from what I've been told. Those two teams showed a lot of interest there yesterday at LSU's Pro Day and have been connected to him. So those teams are doing their due diligence. But I think it's going to be Harrison as the first wide receiver off the board and first non-quarterback off the board, whether that be at 4 to Arizona or 5 there to the Chargers. It's going to be one of those two teams.
Yeah, you're still having to pay a premium, though less of a premium than before. First non-quarterback off the board, -500. Last time we met, it was -800. So that is dipped a little bit. And obviously that's coincided with a rise from Malik Nabers, who's gone from 5-1 to 3-1 to be the first non-quarterback off the board. Connor, I'll kick it to you. I'll let you kind of take us anywhere you want in terms of where we were at in here in the double digit, low teens, or anything that you have. I mean, we've kind of spent a lot of our time over the last handful of shows here, and we could touch on some other markets that are out there currently, but any, positions that were hard, any teams that you feel locked in on a player or a position or anything else you want to talk about here in the mock?
Yeah, I think there are a couple interesting points. The corners are really interesting because like Quinyon Mitchell, I think you go as high as 8 as we talked about. 15 to me feels like it's floor. I think that the Colts are a perfect fit for him, like in terms of Chris Ballard, love, size, speed guys. I think Quinyon Mitchell had like a 9.6 a RAS score, so a relative athletic score. I 17 corner for the Jags makes a lot of sense. I think with Terry and Arnold there. And then the Bengals drafting offensive line and Saints drafting offensive line, both with given kind of like recently what we've seen. I know that the Saints just signed, the Bengals just signed another offensive lineman, Trent Brown, I believe it was. But the Saints, was it Ryan Ramczyk? Has a debilitative knee and may not play again, and they already need offensive line help. So I don't know. I think that 14, especially given how many offensive linemen are just awesome in this year's class, I think Saints O-line was super strong. It was almost an official play of ours. I know it, but it was -120, only a DraftKings $70 limit. Again, I mean, we are respectable touts, not going to just tout one out things with $70 limits. We would like at least 2+ outs. So we will have plenty of stuff, but it just wasn't the right time. Caesars didn't post, FanDuel didn't post. And of course, FanDuel posted, and it's like minus 200. So what are we going to do?
Still a good bet. I mean, it still is. I mean, it's like it feels in terms of like this range. And again, I know not everyone has an appetite for minus 200, but like I don't know. Like I just can't imagine a scenario where they go anywhere else in the first round. I thought they were doing this before when there were questions around Ramcheks. And Scott, you could talk about this local guy there in Louisiana. Like now that we have this news where there's even more concern about his ability to even play at all this year, like it feels like an absolute lock. So like, again, to Connor's point, when we touched on the Jayden Daniels thing, like it's a different market versus like the 60, 30, 10 stuff with Jayden Daniels versus what you would do in a typical betting market. Like feeling like what we know, even though it's minus 200, like I feel like that's still a really viable play because I can't imagine the Saints doing anything else.
Yeah. So as far as Ramchek goes, it's been known down here, since middle of last season, even before that he's having complications. And essentially what it is that he's got no cartilage left in that knee. It was known when he was coming out the draft that he was going to have some knee issues and that it could shorten his career. And that's exactly what it's played out to be. They did go and run him through a surgery here recently. It's not responded well as they hope. And I think there are some real issues that he will end up retiring and maybe not play another game for the rest of his career. So I think that's a very real possibility. Everybody around here has, expected them to go ahead and draft offensive line. The one name that I do hear, and it's a name that I hear from multiple teams in this range, is that Brian Thomas is a guy that the Saints are interested in, but specifically being hamstrung by the offensive line is something that they need to address. It's just hard to see them going ahead and drafting offensive line. I mean, anything other than offensive line. If they were not to pick offensive line and Brian Thomas were on the board, he's the guy I would look to. But the two names that I'm hearing consistently with the Saints are specifically Talise Fuaga and then Olu Fashanu as well. Those are two guys. Specifically Fashanu, I hear that they like his footwork and his movement skills and would project him there on the left side. But the Saints are so hamstrung as far as salary cap, it's just not easy for them to address this anywhere other than the draft.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Yeah, still I think 200 on DraftKings as well. Still feels like a really, really strong look. Connor, you touched on the Bengals there too. The Bengals are interesting to me. The guy that you have going right behind to the Rams, Byron Murphy, feels like a absolute great fit for what the Bengals need with DJ Reader moving on, BJ Hill in the last year of his deal. Is a massive, massive need. Now, again, they touched on Trent Brown. They brought him in to kind of solidify the right side of the line with Jonah Williams moving on. Trent Brown really struggled last year in New England, didn't play a ton. I had Jeff in the chat. He's an absolute turnstile. Yeah, it wasn't great, but you also have your other massive need fitting a significantly, I think, a really exciting player. I mean, I like Byron Murphy, and he's a great fit for the Rams as well. So I can get on board for both. I just think when you look at kind of the betting market, where we could see here, we get some interesting prices. Some of the stuff on the Bengals makes a lot of sense. Minus 200 to take an offensive lineman, which is what you have here. Defensive line is plus 4.25, which again, from a sprinkling standpoint, I'm a little bit interested in. Were you just kind of blindly locked into offensive line, or any thoughts on that?
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially kind of the way you broke it down. I would love some Byron Murphy unders on an over-under. I think we probably would have gotten a better price like a week or two ago because he seemed to be more like a back 20s kind of guy. And I think that he's more of like a late teens, early 20s kind of guy. I mean, someone even, I don't know, maybe it was that same guy that talked about the Falcons or something, had them like one of their top picks as Byron Murphy. So, I mean, that would obviously be a massive reach relative to our expectations, but again, wouldn't be the first time that NFL teams just said, threw up the middle finger to the mock drafters and picked a guy like 15 spots too early.
Yeah, I had him at 13 in the Raiders in my first mock draft, but that was before the Christian Wilkins signing. That changes things a little bit there. But he's an exciting prospect and does fit a need there too. I understand, obviously, if you're the Bengals, the investment in the offensive line, protecting Joe Burrow, giving him time to do stuff makes a ton of sense. You need to have some long-term answers there too. I also feel really good about the the Jaguars, as you mentioned, going corner. That fits a massive need. We've heard some stuff from Trent Baalke just talking about needing to bring in talent there. We're getting into some spots where we're having to lay a little bit of juice to get there on some of these. Jags though, minus 110 to take a corner. Next on the board would be plus 180 to take a wide receiver. Like, I know Gabe Davis has some concerns, but like they do have some bodies there. Whereas like they need a ton of help at corner. They try to roll it back basically with the entirety of the defense from the year before last year. That did not go very well. You're being able to get, a consensus top corner there makes a ton of sense. Like, again, we're a month out. Do I want to like take that step when it's like 140 and on the move versus when it's 110? I don't know. I kind of like Jags laying minus 110 to take a corner. Any thoughts?
I'm curious though. So my only concern is like Arnold could very easily go 13 to the Raiders. I know that they've been connected a bunch. So and Mitchell, I think again, the 15, I've said, I think that's like legit his floor. Like
Sure.
who did the Jags pick then? Like, did they grab Wiggins? Is it like, Kool-Aid? It feels like he's kind of more like a back half the first round guy. That's my only concern about laying juice is like, if those two guys are gone, like, I mean, the Jags' hand might be forced unless they like really like Nate Wiggins, which maybe they do. I guess maybe they're Nate Wiggins team. I don't know. Do you put any thought into that if it's not the top two guys?
Yeah, no, it's totally fair. So I think Wiggins is tough to peg because he could go, I think, to the Jags, or he could fall all the way down to like the late, early 30s, the bottom part of this first round, depending on, because again, like he's an outlier in terms of his size. It has some nice tape, but he's just rail thin. We have the Emmanuel Forbes thing last year, which kind of broke the model. That didn't go so well. Emmanuel Forbes like got benched midseason and had trouble staying on the field for the Commanders last year. So again, these are kind of like the John Ross, Xavier Worthy thing. Like there's precedent for it.
Yeah.
It didn't always go so well, right? The teams want to like use the one example sample to be like, oh no, I'm making a decision or not making a decision based off of it. I think some Kool-Aid stuff has been positive as of late. I could see him going a little bit higher than maybe we first had him going. So yeah, there's at least options. Cooper DeJean, if he gets healthy enough where he can start to test and show out for pro days and one-on-ones, like his versatility is nice, especially since they moved on with, Rayshawn Jenkins going to Seattle. Like his ability to play maybe safety and corner could work as well. So I think it's a totally fair point, but I think there are enough viable options here in the back half that are going in this range. Whereas I do think we all agree that Mitchell and Arnold are kind of in the tier above everyone else. There's enough there for them to find a need where it's a really clear home run for them. Any Scott, any concerns here or things to add here, Scott, on Jacksonville?
Yeah, I tend to agree, and Arnold's actually in my next mock draft. That's where I have him pegged, is there at 17. So we're in agreement there. But it is like you said, if it's not Arnold and it's not Quinyon Mitchell are already off the board, it kind of gets hard. I don't know. Nate Wiggins, there are the size concerns like we discussed, but specifically, I think McKinstry is a guy that might start moving back up. Supposedly he ran at his pro day even with the injury and still put it in like mid 4.4s. So it's just a matter of projecting how long the recovery is going to be after he does have a procedure done, if he can get back in time for camp and whatnot. So I think he's a guy that you'll probably start to see rise a little bit. But I think him, Cooper DeJean, and Nate Wiggins are all kind of jumbled up for that third, and it's just going to be a matter of health. I think if you start going into size and some other things, I think DeJean and McKinstry kind of may end up jumping Wiggins if their health pans out. So I think that size issue is gonna end up being an issue for some teams as far as fit and specifically schemes that they run on the back end.
Yeah, you make a good point, Connor. It is definitely probably the reason to not make the play at this point. But yeah, it's definitely one that I have like in pencil circled, trying to like nudge you guys to fire on.
All we need is a little bit of rumblings that they like another guy. You know what I mean? Then
For sure.
I think I would be down, just because we just don't have any like real other connections at this point, because it makes sense on paper. And if we hear that they're like Cooper DeJean, in play there, then I think I'd feel a little more comfortable with the minus 110 there specifically. I feel like we should talk about Xavier Worthy because we talked about him a lot offline. You guys said you don't have him in your first round mock. I have him at 28. Again, it's kind of like that field stretcher replacing Gabe Davis for the Bills. Broke the NFL Combine record. I tweeted out a comparison to his stats of John Ross. Both were, eerily similar in terms of yards per reception, total yards their final year. John Ross is 20 pounds heavier than Xavier Worthy, which obviously matters. And then John Ross is also a massive bust in the 9th overall selection. But at the same time, you get in this back half, I think Buffalo would really benefit from a field stretcher like him, and it makes sense there. Maybe, I mean, even a team like Arizona at 27, if for some reason they trade back, I think could make sense. They don't have Marquise Brown. Like, I think that would not be, I'm taking AD Mitchell at 23, but Mitchell could easily be gone before that as well. So, like, I think that to me, he's kind of like a, 60-40 first round guy. And to you guys, it seems like he's more like a 40-60 outside looking in. Do I have that right? I feel like that was kind of the sentiment that I got from you guys.
Scott, I'll let you go first here.
Yeah, so for me, I have him on the outside of the first round. Specifically when we're talking about Buffalo. Buffalo signed Curtis Samuel, who's probably going to play out of the slot. Stephon Diggs is kind of up in the air. You actually have lines out as far as where he's going to play for his next team to open up the season. I still think he ends up staying with Buffalo. And then you have to ask yourself, Khalil Shakir kind of came on towards the end of the year. Did he do enough maybe to fill that position that maybe you think Xavier Worthy's being drafted for there in Buffalo? So those are some of the questions that I have. But specifically when we start talking about Xavier Worthy, some team, some scout is going to fall in love with that speed factor, and it only takes one. It is an elite trait that he has, so there is some justification as far as him having it. I just don't see it right now at this point, and the reason being is I just think there's some stronger players looking to get in there at the bottom part of that first round, specifically when we start talking about some of these offensive tackles, are some of the players that I like. And then you have to kind of like look at some of the other needs and look, when it comes to Buffalo, I think Buffalo in particular has, a few needs. They had a lot of players leaving, due to some of the salary issues that they've had. So I think there's some stuff that they need to replace on defense, and even a few holes along the offensive line. So I think Buffalo is a tricky team to go ahead and project. But if you start buying into the Stephon Diggs being going thing, then Xavier Worthy makes sense there.
Yeah, I think the trade is electric. It is, outside of some of the other trades, maybe the most desirable traits. It is the sexy trait for sure. And he has it in spades in a way that no one else has ever done. And that comes from, there's a little bit of profile there, right? He went to Texas. This isn't a kid that was just in a small school, ran really fast. I think that pedigree piece matters. Part of it for me is just finding a home for him. It's not about first round, second round. It's kind of I don't think he goes ahead of AD Mitchell. And you don't have, that's what you have too. You have Mitchell going ahead of him. Then you get into where the rest of that back half. And if we look at your fourth column here of teams, which is, I don't think he goes ahead of that personally. I have a hard time fitting him in any of these other teams. You could sell me, I guess, on the Cardinals at 27 if they didn't go, wide receiver with one of the other two picks. Obviously hard for you to do here because three wide receivers would be definitely a stance. We're coming out of this with pass catchers for Kyler. Then you get into again, Buffalo makes a lot of sense. I'm with Scott. I have Cooper DeJean there right now because I think he fits a mold with losing safety help, losing Tre'Davious White. They have a lot of young corners that necessarily aren't top performers, so I think they need some sort of answer there at corner. I think Detroit's really hard to peg. They're going to go probably best player on the board because they can afford to, and maybe have some, maybe that's a spot for them. But is he a little bit redundant with Jameson Williams? Probably, right? It's a fast team. If they did it, that's hot, but a little bit interesting. I think that they would probably do something different there too. And then in terms of the last three teams, I don't think those teams anymore. Personally, I think it's offensive line for Casey. It's probably your last landing spot on the board that someone would push back on, but I think that that's an offensive line team right now based off of all the needs and some of the moves that they've had in the offseason. So it's not about worthy or not worthy for being a first round pick, pun intended, but I just think it's more of difficulty finding a landing spot. So, and I get why you did it with Buffalo.
Yeah,
the discussion around conference discussions more interesting because that's the other one we were having. If you want to kind of touch base on that, Connor.
Yeah, so we were looking at over-under players in, I think this is Big 12 specifically here. So if we're looking at them, the Big 12 here, we have, I guess, 5-ish guys that we're considering here. I'm trying to pull up the sheet here, but it's my streaming thing is blocking it. Okay, position totals. So Big 12, we have Byron Murphy, Tyler Guyton, AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Kingsley Suma, and Zach Frazier. I mean, that's 6 guys. You need 4 of them to go. It's about even money right now. We were kind of going back and forth on this. I think the over could be worth a good look because, again, I have Worthy in the first round. Even if he does go, I think Suma is an interesting look. I kind of have Murphy and Guyton as almost locks at this point, with AD Mitchell essentially almost a lock as well. So, I mean, you just need one of those three guys to go. I still think the over is an interesting look, but I'll kick it to you guys because I think we had some disagreement there.
I'm kind of right there. I think it's probably a viable bet, but like it's to your same point of like you're pushing back on the Jacksonville thing. I'd love to have like a little bit more clarity. I kind of think those first three are locks personally. Like I think there's Byron Murphy, no doubt, Tyler Guyton going like in like 90% of mocks according to VR sheet here. AD Mitchell increasingly too. He's right around there, 85% of first rounds. And that feels like it's happening for sure. Then it gets into the fact that you need, one of the next three guys that are all kind of borderline softly in, right? So again, you have three outs. The one element, Scott, that I think we both agree on that kind of changes the math here is what happens at 12 and 13 with Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Those quarterbacks, one or two of them getting added to the fray, pushes some stuff down that makes it a little bit interesting, and that becomes a fairly decent sweat. And again, something that I think is interesting, Connor like popped it into our chat. We were talking is like plus 110. That's interesting, but not like oh yeah, we got to get it right now. What are your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I'm leaning and starting to feel more strongly that there are going to be 5 quarterbacks there taken in the first round of the draft. Specifically, when we start looking at the Big 12, I think a lot of these guys are kind of on the bubble. I've heard that Kansas City very strongly likes Kingsley Suamataia. But one of the other guys that we're kind of split on is when you start talking about the center out of Frazier out of West Virginia. He's a guy that I've heard that while he is liked, that some scouts do like him, that he doesn't have any elite traits. He came back and had a good season and everything, but like his best trait is going to be his movement. That specifically when it comes to scouting him, that teams are a little concerned about his play strength. When you start talking about movement skills, that would kind of peg him there, 31 to San Francisco with some of the movement stuff that they run along the offensive line. But I've heard specifically. Tony Pauline's one person that you can go ahead and look at, and I want to say Michael Lombardi was another one that basically came out and said that they don't see Frazier, and from people that they've talked to, he will not be a first round pick. So I struggle with having him as one of those possible outs to go ahead and get you above that line there for the Big 12 players. I think if I had to, put my money on a player, it would be Suamataia. But then, when you start adding him and Worthy into the mix and start thinking about, is a team going to move up to grab that quarterback in the first round and trade into, those last 4 to 5 picks, who are the players that are going to drop out there? And I think those are those bubble players that we're looking at here in the Big 12.
Yeah, well said. I think that's all viable points. Definitely something to kind of watch because it's I think Connor makes a good point. He's kind of, I think, again, swimming in the right waters here that make a ton of sense. Interesting question here, Connor, if you want to touch on this in the chat or whatever, wherever else you want to go.
Yeah, so Brian, I'll touch on this real quick. Brian, 101 offshore MHA to go 7th, worth it. 1 through 4 QB, Chargers, offensive tackle or defense, New York Giants Neighbors. Yeah, I mean that's a scenario that would have to happen. I think it's certainly more likely than 1 out of every 100 times. So yeah, I mean I put $15 or whatever to win 1,500. So it's like in this day and age, that's not even like Chipotle at this point. So whatever, some lunch money, go crazy with it. Again, I'm just I like to at this point. I am trying to maximize like the crazy outcomes, put a little bit here and there. And then if all it takes is getting one right, that's all it takes and it'll pay for all the rest plus a lot more. So I think there's still going to be a lot of changes that happen before the draft, but something that I specifically, noticed betting on the NBA draft, the NHL draft, the NFL draft last year, information for 3 months leading up to the draft, like 80% of it was junk. 24 hours before the draft, 48 hours before the draft, information was like 75% correct. Like it was just like way, way, way more accurate. Wasn't even close. And so something I'm trying to avoid this year is getting locked in on, anything that's like super minus money outside of like, again, like a Saints offensive line. Like they just can't physically trot out a line that's, like they have. And so the top part of the draft and same for number 4. So that's kind of my take there. I know I went a little longer on it than possible, but just philosophically, that's where we're at right now, I think, in the draft period. But maybe in the next 2 weeks, we'll start laying a little bit more there. There was I guess something else that I wanted to add, but I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, Scott, question here. So Pac-12 over under is interesting. Then if you think one of the quarterbacks goes, we're talking about Bo Nix or Michael Penix, their over under is 6.5. You need Caleb, Odunze, Fuaga, Fatu, all locks. That's 4 guys right there. And then you need 2 or 3 of Jackson Powers, Johnson, Latu, Nix, Penix, Jordan Morgan, or Troy Franklin in as well. There's a lot of outs there. My concern was that JPJ and Latu are both a little sketchy in terms of like their draft stocks. But any thoughts there on the Pac-12?
Yeah, I actually like that number. I'm gonna have to look into it a little bit more. Specifically, I think Latu is kind of one of the guys that you have to look at, but both of the quarterbacks are outs. I like the outs that you have there. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you were talking about with trying to find like plus money on a lot of these and not getting locked into some of the odds that you have early on, because the information will become clear. I think it's also important to set aside and decide what your bankroll is going to be for betting the NFL draft, and set aside, look, whether your risk tolerance is to go ahead and say, look, I'm going to use 20 to 15% of what my budget is to go ahead and play some of these long shots that'll pay for a lot of other bets. I think it's important to figure out. But when it comes to looking at specifically the Pac-12, Jordan Morgan is a guy that is getting a lot of love and being connected to a lot of teams. Specifically, when you start talking about Baltimore there at 30, I've heard that they love both Guyton and Jordan Morgan as far as prospects there at 30. But I think there are a lot of outs for Pac-12. I mean, excuse me, Pac-12, whatever they are now. But I think there's a lot of outs there for those guys and from these teams to go ahead and hit the over. I like the value there.
It's a great look. The problem is the bet's minus 180 on Caesars. So, I think there are a lot of outs. There are a bunch. But again, it gets into the discussion of like the Saints number. Draft betting is different. I'm just way more willing to lay a little bit of juice if I feel like we either have information or there are so many buying signs, team needs, and players that are gaining steam that are becoming more solidified into the first round. So it's a great look, but the prices.
Yeah, I'll never forget what was it, Barry Horse's quote like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. It's like draft betting is not about the bets that are minus 100 that should, or like even money that should be like minus 200. It's about the bets that are, whatever they are, but are actually minus infinity. That's what you should be focusing on for draft season. It's so much more important, and you make so much more money on things that are going to happen and are like way more likely, instead of just the bets that like have value in traditional sports betting sense.
100% correct. Like Jeff gets it. I'm willing to go all in here on the draft. I bet on Scotty Scheffler to win golf tournaments and to do really good things in golf tournaments. So I have extra money in my account all the time because that guy just does those things, and then I can, we have more money to play with in the draft. So it makes it a little bit easier. MJ knows juice isn't real. You only have to pay it when you lose. It's a classic MJ saying. So it's interesting. So let's get into some more. I have a couple other thoughts that are in this no juice section here.
Run it.
Going back on the draft here. Miami Dolphins are currently minus 180 on DraftKings to select an offensive lineman. They have a massive need to select an offensive lineman. When you look here on recent mocks, looking at VR sheets, 56% of the drafts have the Dolphins taking an offensive lineman, pretty high with them taking a defensive lineman. With all that they want to do, with the way that the cog of that offense runs, quick timing, you have to keep Tua protected. And the interior of that offensive line is a disaster right now. Considering the talent available in this offensive line, whether it's internally here with JPJ, with what Connor did, or it's something along the edge, they need to do something to address the offensive line. Again, minus 180, really tough. And the odds based off of what's going on in VR sheet don't tell you that that's a buy. But any mock that I respect has Miami taking an offensive lineman. I can't be sold on anything different. Scott, any thoughts there?
Yeah, the player that I'm actually looking at is offensive lineman. It's Graham Barton from Duke. He's a guy that I think fits what they want to do. The issue when you have multiple positions across your offensive line that are in flux, and the fact that Barton can play all 5 positions. I think
Yes.
he makes a lot of sense for everything that they run. He's, not specifically scheme dependent. He's versatile, can play multiple schemes, good movement, good power. I think he makes a lot of sense there to Miami. And I'm with you. I think it's going to be an offensive lineman, but these books are starting to get sharper and sharper with where they're aligning some of the things. And specifically, the books are waiting longer and longer periods, getting closer to the draft to let some of these lines out. So that's part of the issue you have here.
Yeah, we're not getting over under on these players. That's actually gonna be really challenging, I think, is to parse through some of the over unders specifically on offensive linemen, because we know they're going in the first round, but where they go can be very specific. If you're a right tackle only, are you playing interior offensive line? That becomes very, very difficult to kind of parse through. That's going to make it pretty challenging, in my opinion, to kind of suss through, Connor. But any thoughts on the Dolphins, or you're a Dolphins to a stan? You have a Dolphins to a tramp stamp that you got a couple years ago.
Yeah, no, it still holds up well. I mean, 2-on forever, baby. Never backing down. No, I think that they do need some help up front. I think that they really, to be more versatile with their offense, he needs time. He needs a little bit so that they can be better in the running game, so that they can introduce more concepts than just slants and goes to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's either that or deep play action where they hope to hit him over the middle, and that's about all they got. I would love to see him, kind of introduce some more stuff, and they just need a better offensive line. But a market that I've been waiting for is just to be a first round pick market. You can usually parlay that stuff too on FanDuel. They dropped to be a top 5 pick. You can't parlay it yet, so it's not that interesting. But I thought it was notable that JJ McCarthy is minus 300 to be a top 5 pick. If we get an over under on him right now, I think that we're probably seeing 4.5 or 3.5 juiced over. One of those two, because the hype to 2 is pretty real, but I guess I'm not buying it there specifically. I will say, Noonan, after the show, you should look. FanDuel dropped all of their team to position props. They're almost like an extra 10, 15, and they're releasing stuff every day. So shout out to FanDuel doing Lord's work there. DraftKings, we need some more out of you, because we just need more limits, and this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, the more outs. Having some of these markets that we like, that we are resistant to fight, like the Saints one is a great example. We both wanted to bet it. We will try to bet it. It's a $70 limit with 1 out. This is really hard to send to subscribers and be like, here you go. We're gonna move the market as well, and then you can get just a little bit down. So yeah, good luck. It's just it's not our brand. It's not what we do. Others, they're fine with that. We just know it's not how we hang. Yeah. Anything else in closing? I want to look at this Chiefs here real quick, because again, I know we still are. We're kind of more consensus on offensive line, whereas still receivers the favorite in the market, minus 110 for the Chiefs to go receiver with their first pick. Offensive line plus 210 on DraftKings. That's interesting to me. Corners moved with the Snead news. I thought that was a little bit more interesting. I think it was 6-1 before the Snead trade, and I thought that was viable. They do have some depth there. They've drafted it well there in the last handful of years, so that's in play for me. But 2-1 offensive line, pretty interesting. Any thoughts there, Connor? Or anything else you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
I played Chiefs corner at 7-1 before they lost Snead, but that, I don't know. I feel like I might just play offensive line at this point and kind of de-risk and just hopefully it's one of those two, because I'm not entirely sure. I was totally on my draft props, and this is just a bonus for anyone who's listened 58 minutes here. The most ridiculous bet that I've made so far: Brock Bowers of the Cowboys at 75-1 of them trading up into the early to mid-teens for a guy like Brock. It's the most Jerry move of all time, I think, would be trading up to get Brock Bowers. Nice SEC boy, absolute stud. I don't know. Some beat writers have him number 1 on the projected Cowboys board. So I don't know. Just some thoughts.
I don't need that. That's fun. They're all in this offseason.
Why not?
Yeah. No, 75-1. At this point, Scott said in the chat, we know nothing, just take long shots. Yeah. Not that we know nothing per se, but his point is there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of groupthink, and being able to connect dots like Connor's talking about there that do make sense, that seem you obviously need a couple of things to happen for it to go that way. He's not falling to 24, but again, hey, it's the draft. Stranger things happen. They want to take a swing. They're kind of essentially telling you they're going all in by not doing anything with Dak's contract, which is definitely an interesting thing too. So Yeah, I don't hate that too. The other one is the Steelers offensive line. When you see the Steelers like needs listed, it's like interior offensive line, like tackle. we're still talking about offensive linemen, right? Like it's just other than the tackle that they got last year, like they're kind of good, and you can lay some juice for it. Obviously, you need to, but does that make a ton of sense? To me, it does. Offensive line minus 140 for the Steelers. I know wide receivers in play, I guess, plus 2.25 is the next play. I still think cornerback is a need for them, but maybe not in the first rounds after acquiring Dante Jackson in the Johnson trade there. So I mean, minus 140. Steelers is the one like I feel like we're gonna know, but like it feels like an offensive lineman, guys. I don't know. Like I'm in this like I'm just swimming around these. I want to lay some juice. Part of it is I do think I want to get some bets down, but I also do think like I'd be very surprised if these things change based off of anything that can go on right now in free agency. There's just not a lot of big name free agencies that are going to additions that are going to change teams' first round draft needs at this point. So any thoughts there, Scott, on Steelers offensive line 140?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I have them projected at as well. Most of the mock drafts that you're going to see, specifically when you start mapping out where a lot of the players are going to be available at, and specifically team needs. That's kind of it. I think you're right when you talk about wide receiver being kind of one of the other places. One of the wide receivers that I have heard connected to them is Tyler Boyd. I heard that may be a signing that they make here shortly. Yeah. So that could kind of maybe fill that wide receiver issue that they have and push it a little bit more towards offensive line. So that's one of the things. Just a few notes for me to kick it off with and kind of finalize some things. I have a friend of mine that I've known for about 18 years that's involved with some sports management and managing a few of these players and stuff. But specifically the Bo Nix talk, when we start talking about Bo Nix, I'm hearing from him specifically that teams are higher on Bo Nix and they have higher grades than they currently have projected grades onto the top quarterbacks coming out next year, talking about Shedeur Sanders and a couple of other guys. So that Bo Nix is a guy that a lot of front offices trust to run the offense. I think, he is a fit there in Denver for what Sean Payton wants to do. Somebody that'll go out and, not make a lot of off key plays and follow specifically the reads that are within the offense. He's been connected there with Denver. I hear that Denver is also looking at Penix as an option as well. But the situation that Denver finds himself in is not wanting to overpay and overdraft one of these players. So the option that I'm hearing is that they're looking and exploring options to move into the back part of the draft, but it's really what they're going to do. And we've talked about it here offline. That's not a situation you play with too often where you trade back to get a quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see what Denver does there. And then Brian Thomas, specifically from the Pro Day yesterday, is a guy that is getting a lot of hype from a lot of teams there that are in the wide receiver market. Specifically, within that 10 range, I've heard, him there connected to the Jets. I've heard that he's an option for Arizona, Denver, even with the Saints. So I think he's a guy that's going to probably end up getting drafted a little bit higher than what he's at. I think expected draft position has him around like 18 or 19 right now. I think he's going to go in the top half.
Team to draft Bo Nix on FanDuel. Denver Broncos plus 160. They are plus 470 to draft Michael Penix. They are minus 125 to draft a quarterback in the first rounds. DraftKings does not have that market, but they are. It's only available on FanDuel.
And that's a number that's come down because when you look at Bo Nix connected to Denver a couple weeks ago, it was plus 200, plus 250.
Dude, they're taking a quarterback, man. I'm telling you, I don't know who it's going to be, but they're taking a quarterback. Like we might not like it. Like it's again, like the quarterback's so hard to evaluate. Teams miss all the time. We think we know about Bo Nix. We're probably right, but like, dude, it's so hard. Like so hard at quarterback. So I mean, yeah, I think these are just again, this is not a long shot to sprinkle in on. Maybe the Penix number at 470 is, but yeah, man, I don't know. These things are interesting.
Also, if you're a team in like the back half of the first round, I mean, you want Denver's first round pick next year. I mean, like
1,000%. It's a great point.
I mean, I think it's like a top 10 pick lock. Like, I mean, they're going to be not good no matter, especially the Bo Nix fucking being their quarterback. I mean, what a joke. This is just, it's going to be a disaster. So if I'm in team 20 and on, I'm taking Denver's first.
Yeah. No, very, very good point. You brought that up yesterday. I thought it was an excellent point because, yeah, they're going to be not good. So, all right. Before you leave, if you're hanging out with us, we appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel here, 4for4 Bets, so you don't miss a show. We'll be back next week. And again, as we ramp up and we get closer now, we're just a month out, we will turn up the heat. You will have, more mock drafts. You'll have another mock coming from Scott here in the coming days, maybe early next week. You can find on the website 4for4.com. Another one for me coming here shortly in the coming weeks as well. And then, we'll start to do more shows, more content as needed as we get closer here. So check that out before you leave. So for Connor and Scott, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.